Love your background, Kay.
Thank you. That's our farm in Kent.
Okay, so we are having people coming in. In the meantime, I'm going to do some quick introductions. Hello, guys, and welcome to day one of the London Funders Festival of Learning, or as we're calling it on Twitter, #LondonLearnFest. For those who are unfamiliar with London Funders, we are the membership organisation of funders for London Civil Society. We're now 170 strong. And we bring our members to connect, contribute, cooperate and convene and essentially try and make London a better place through working together. I'm going to be very brief on this introduction because this is an hour-long session and we will be finishing 5 minutes early. So just to say that the format of today's session is a webinar, which means as it is 1 o'clock, if anybody wants to go make a cup of tea, have a salad or anything slightly more substantial, we're not going to see you, but we'd love for you to stay engaged with the conversation. As well, it's an hour long. We are going to have a presentation from John on the City Bridge Trust Funder Plus programme, followed by a conversation bringing in Dave, Mark and Kay and Ben. And then there's going to be a facilitated Q&A at the end. If you could pop your questions in the chat, questions in the Q&A box and comment in the chat box, that would be utterly fantastic. And yeah, just to say, please do give us a follow on social media and share comments all the way through. I completely understand that this is not a festival in the traditional sense. I would not wear slippers to a festival, but you know that we'd like to try and make it as interactive as possible. And just to say as well, from a London Funders perspective, we're really interested in this session because Funder Plus, you know, things like resilience have been huge conversations over the past year, especially with funders being able to use all of their assets to make sure that London and the rest of the country is a better place and the sector is resilient and equipped to deal with any kind of emergency that we are going to face. The last 5 years has been rocky and interesting, to say the least. I'm going to stop there. I'm also going to turn my camera off and we're all going to turn our cameras off for John's presentation. Welcome on board. Happy lunchtime.
Cardinal sin. Right, one muted. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this session. I'm just going to share my screen and check that is all in order. Just bear with. How do I get that?
Slideshow from the beginning, that's it.
I've got you. I'm sorry, Geraldine. I've only been doing this for 15 months. Right, off we go. Well, thank you ever so much. So my name is John Griffiths. I'm with an organisation called Rocket Science, and in a partnership along with colleagues here today, not least Locality, Dave Alquist, who's on the Zoom discussion, Cranfield Trust. Those two organisations, as we'll explain, are what we call the connectors, who are matching grantees from City Bridge Trust programme, the bridging device strategy, with capacity building support. And we've also got for you this afternoon an example from Kay Richardson, who's from the garden classroom, and the providers that have been working with her. So I will briefly give you an introduction to the Bridge Programme pilot and then hand over to the garden classroom, B&G and Intelligent Health, who will talk to you about the way they have benefited from the programme itself. So I want to give you a little bit of an overview, a brief overview of how the programme came into being. The Bridge Programme originated came out of the work that was done on the way ahead, which I think many colleagues on the call will recall, an initiative to look into the future of civil society support and infrastructure within the capital, funded by City Bridge Trust, but with a cross-sectoral partnership driving that initiative. And one of the recommendations from that was to try and shake up or look at how Funder Plus support could be challenged or shaken up or disrupted, and whether that a new approach could be implemented. And we'll take you through that in the course of this hour-long discussion and webinar. Clearly, in the middle of that period, the 2019-21 period, COVID intervened, and as I've used that quote there, whilst everything has changed, at the same time, nothing has changed. So we need to be careful about the extent to which we think COVID has been a completely defining moment and everything has been thrown up in the air, or whether there are things we need to revert back to that we were doing pretty well prior to the pandemic. With that in mind, and the impact that COVID has had, CityBridge have approved a 12-month extension to the programme. We're in the middle at the moment of redesigning that, and that's why this particular session is particularly timely, because whilst this is a reflective opportunity, learning the lessons from the initial pilot, there is an opportunity to pick up ideas and make tweaks and changes for the next 12 months of the programme as we build back and recover from the last 15 months or so of the pandemic. And clearly we're focusing most of the time this afternoon on the case study and then subsequent discussion. So just to give you a little bit of context, this explains a little bit, this diagram, about the kind of issues that we were trying to address in the initial design of the Bridge Programme pilot. As I said, this was something that was flagged in the bridging device strategy, the current funding strategy of CityBridge Trust, with a view to trying to put in place what they called their toolbox to a range of interventions and support that could work alongside grant funding to, I suppose, increase the effectiveness and impact and long-term sustainability of that grant investment. And here on the left of this diagram are some of the barriers that grantees typically were experiencing in terms of being able to take up that kind of offer, that kind of support, commonly known or referred to as Funder Plus. That ranges from time. Clearly, particularly in the last year, 18 months, that has been an absolute premium as things have been knocked sideways and attention has been focused on emergency responses rather than usual service delivery. There are issues around capacities of a lot of organisations funded under CityBridge Trust are relatively quite small, volunteer-led, user-led. So the capacity of some of the organisations to take on support is sometimes limited. One of the things that CityBridge Trust were keen to try and test out is whether funding could be made available to free up leadership time, the capacity of leaders and even trustees in organisations to take time out to be able to work with a provider, work with an expert, work with other organisations to try and address the issues or that they wanted the support with. And sometimes we felt that some of and this is an interesting one, and we're interested to test this out in the discussion, what organisations presented with to their funders or to capacity building support providers as the issues they thought they were struggling with. Once they sat down with an independent, and that's a key word, objective provider to try and help them through the process of understanding their issues, it wasn't necessarily the issues that they identified initially that were at the root of their organisational development, and other issues came to the fore, which became more pressing and more important. The Bridge Programme, essentially, the clue is in the name. It's about trying to connect providers and support organisations with grantees through a diagnostic process. We have two organisations that facilitate that in the shape of Locality and Cranfield Trust. Intentionally, we took, they were both taken on board because they bring slightly different approaches to that, which we might go into. Locality have initially a process called the Lighthouse process, which is an online diagnostic process followed by an intervention one-to-one with a provider. Cranfield take a slightly more hands-on one-to-one process from the outset. What this all led us to concluding is there are three T's here. Firstly, time is of the essence, and that clearly has been at a premium over the past 18 months, but time to get the right connection, time to build the relationship between your support provider and the grantee, whether it be the leader of that organisation or trustees and staff. That builds trust, and trust is fundamental here. Trusting the support that is available, and being trusting of this as being genuinely independent and free of interference from the funder. I think that's what is fundamentally at place here. CBT wanted to deliberately step back and not put any pressure on grantees to take this up, but if they did take it up, to be in control. This is not about the funder dictating or the funder in any way requiring this. It's very much about trying to empower grantees and change that funder grantee dynamic. That is actually slightly at odds, given that what I said about time, trust, and the third I was going to mention is tenacity, that commitment to making the most of that support available. That perhaps works slightly against the fact, what I'm going to say here is we wanted to try and simplify the process in order to make the connections as easy as possible. And those two things sometimes rub up against each other. Nevertheless, we have tried to introduce a process which, for the customer, for the grantee, is built on a relatively simple step-by-step process, which doesn't burden them with huge amounts of paperwork or necessarily huge amounts of time. And the core principles, which are the bullet points on the right-hand side, remain at the heart of the program as we go into the next 12 months. It's about building trust. It's about having successful diagnostic processes, which really get to the heart of the issues that the grantees are experiencing. The third one is perhaps the most important, where we think this is possibly a slightly different approach to Funder Plus support. It's about enabling the grantees to make the choices about the support available. It's not about imposing that on them in any way, shape or form. Another principle is around making sure this is not focused on projects, but it's more about investing in the sustainability of the civil society organisations that are at the bedrock of London and are fundamental to our recovery and renewal from the pandemic. So this is a long-term commitment about building back a sustainable civil society, a vibrant civil society. And linked to that is about making sure this investment creates networks and collaborations and communities of providers who share their experience of working with the grantees, working with the organisations, communities of the grantees themselves, and we'll come back to that in a minute, and community ideally of funders. At the moment, this is an initiative funded purely by City Bridge. However, there is a potential here to extend this further and bring in other investors and funders, potentially working alongside the missions of the London Recovery. So, as I said, in the middle of the initial pilot phase, COVID hit, and I just want to pick out a few things that sort of slightly sideswiped this program, as it has with many other initiatives over the last 15 months or so. Clearly, COVID created very, very quickly unprecedented levels of uncertainty, and it led us to question whether the tools of capacity building, which we had become used to, were they still relevant in a post-COVID environment? So, for example, a lot of capacity building previously has been focused on, Funded Plus support has been focused on growth, on enabling organisations to demonstrate impact, demonstrate achievement, all of that. What we're now looking at is a slightly different context, slightly different culture emerging around the importance of collaboration, the importance of doing things effectively and sustainably. And I think there is a change of dynamic there, which is up for debate and discussion, but certainly something we're picking up and we need to address going forward. Clearly, one of the things that's emerged has been the value of small grassroots micro-organisations, including the so-called mutual aid groups. And they too now, if we are going to sustain that sort of grassroots bottom-up activity, they very much become potential beneficiaries, should they want it, from this sort of Funder Plus support. I think the next point around understanding supply is important, because there's an awful lot of this available through different funders, different grant makers. A lot of them now provide a Funder Plus support. So there's an opportunity, I think, through the offices of someone like London Funders to bring about greater coordination and joined up offers, so that there's not that awful process of unnecessary duplication and reinvention of wheels. And that's very much about what London Funders is there to help funders achieve. Clearly, we've seen, as a result of the necessity of working remotely, an increased importance of digital and real-time data. And that's something that I think the provision of support going forward needs to enhance and improve. We need to increase the availability of that sort of support for organisations in order to meet the sort of kind of objectives that Danny Kruger set out in his review last year. If you remember, there was an interesting quote in that report about the importance of moving from using old data to proven intervention to using real-time data to continuously improve service delivery and the work of grassroots organisations. And that is what some of the Funder Plus support should be able to help organisations with. Clearly, over the past year or so, there also has been for very, very good reasons, a sharpening of the diversity, equity and inclusion lens. And that's again something that in the next 12-month period of the delivery of the pilot, we anticipate some demands for support with. Sorry about the contortion there, but that's something we've got on our agenda going forward. And clearly, there's been unprecedented funder collaboration as a result of COVID. And in a way, it brings us back to the origins of the Bridge programme, when Jenny Field convened a group of funders around a table to think this through. And there was some interest, but no commitment at that stage to jointly co-investing in an initiative of this sort. Perhaps that opportunity is now there, linked to as I said, the London Renewal and Recovery programme going forward, as set out in the various missions that you will be familiar with. I'll put in brackets, in parentheses there, the risks. Yes, I think some grantees actually welcome the fact that they can, as you'll be well aware, that they can work unilaterally or independently with lots of different funders, and they potentially see the risk of everything coming together and being put into one big initiative, one big pot. And we do need to be mindful of that, certainly going forward. I'm not going to spend long on this, but although the numbers, because of the COVID crisis as much as anything, but also possibly because we haven't been as bold or in promoting and marketing this initiative as we maybe should have been, there has been great feedback from those organisations that have gone through the programme. And I'm not going to steal her thunder, but hopefully Kay at the Garden Classroom can tell you her experience shortly and add to that. So very quickly before I do hand over to other colleagues, in the context of this Festival of Learning, what is it we want to apply to the next pilot phase of the extended pilot phase of the Bridge programme that we have learned from the last 18 months or so? As I said, we're keen to extend our provider base to fill some of the gaps that we have available in the expertise and support amongst the providers whom either Locality or Cranfield can then connect to grantees as they apply to the programme. We want to enhance the marketing communication of it, particularly targeting particular areas, particular size of organisations which we think could benefit from the support. There is some, we have already simplified the user interface, if you pardon that expression, in terms of how they can access and go online and apply on a Google form, which is I think a 10 or 15 minute application process. We would like to test out other forms of support, potentially building on a really good example from Esme Fairbairn, which is about actually enabling small groups to come together to develop mutual self-help approaches to a Funder Plus offer. That's something we'd like to test out this year in London for sure. And then we want to be clearer, I think, about what the performance indicators are from an initiative like this, which we would then be able to use to, I think, make the so-called business case for other funders and other partners to come in behind potentially a London Recovery Funder Plus offer. But again, that's very much open for debate and discussion, which hopefully we'll get onto in shortly. There are other aspects to the City Bridge Funder Plus offer that we want to build in. It's not just about the triaging and connecting and providing sort of consultancy-based support, but there are other assets at the disposal, particularly of CBT, but other funders that we want to bring in here around maybe some employee-supported volunteering expertise, the assets of the Corporation of London, that sort of thing, which is part of the Bridging Divide strategy, which we haven't fully realised yet, but certainly have an intention to do so going forward. And as I've said, this is about underpinning now the renewal, which is at the heart of the missions. And importantly, as I hand over to one of the success stories, capturing more of those and evidencing the impact of the programme in order to bring in more support and potentially other funders to back this kind of initiative, because there is definitely demand out there. So apologies for going on slightly longer than intended, but without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, but hand over to colleagues in the form of Dave Alquist at Locality, Kay, who's the Chief Exec at the Garden Classroom, and the providers Ben Payne and Mark Harris, who've worked with the Garden Classroom under the Bridge programme.
Thanks, John. That was really, really useful. And just a reminder to everyone, we're going to have a conversation now between the panelists, but certainly after that, be bringing you all in. Or I've just seen I'm being transcribed as I speak. That just took me by surprise. We'll be bringing in, inviting you to submit your questions and answers using the Q&A box and your comments via the chat, and we'll be widening out the conversation afterwards. Just to introduce myself, I'm Dave from Locality. For those that don't know, we are a countrywide network for place-based community organisations. We do influencing, we do comms and memberships. I'm very much a membership organisation and keen on doing peer-to-peer support, as well as providing support to community organisations and consultancy and so on. We are proud London Funders members, as I'm pretty sure you are, John, as well. Coming at this, really, I mean, we are fund distributors to some extent, but more commonly we're kind of partnering with funders on various programs. A big example, for example, is the Bright Ideas Fund partnering with Power to Change, where we effectively do, it's not a sort of funder, it's grant funding, and it's more majoring on organizational development support with some grant added onto it, if you like. And we also are running our community spaces at risk. So a little plug for that, which because we're doing a session on that as part of this festival next Tuesday at 3 p.m. And then again, that's kind of a funder plus blended approach. But I suppose on the whole, we're coming, and the reason we're involved as a partner in the Bridge program is really from the perspective of our experience as a provider of development support to groups. So, you know, kind of having an understanding of that process has been really a boon. And also just to say that you've just got us in terms of the two partners, John and myself today, but we are two of four partners on this, along with Cranfield Trust, who provide a mirror Locality's role as the connector, and of course City Bridge Trust as a partner in this. And I can see we've got colleagues from both of those organisations on the call, so no doubt you'll have your chance to you know, come in on questions and come in on points via the chat at that stage. So we thought it'd be really good to just tell a real life story of an example of a team we've brought together under the Bridge project. So let's get a bit of a chat going between the three of you. I wonder if Mark, Ben and Kay, would you mind sort of briefly introducing yourselves to start off? I mean, I wonder if we perhaps go with Mark and Ben first, just as a brief introduction, because we'll come on in more depth to your role, and then we'll go to Kay as the, if you like, the grantee, the clients in this case. So Mark or Ben, whoever wants to go.
Yep, no problem. I'll kick us off then. Yeah, so I'm Mark Harris. I'm the head of research at a Reading-based company called Intelligent Health. Now, Intelligent Health aim to create healthier, more active and more connected communities. One part of that is by delivering a range of primarily physical activity programs, which are community-based. And then another segment of that then is working with other organizations to help them improve how they deliver or how they evaluate what they deliver. So specifically for this project, we were involved with helping the Garden Classroom really hone in on how they capture data, what data they capture, and really reach or evidence the outcomes that they felt that they were generating. And I'll hand over to Ben then.
Hello, my name's Ben. I'm one half of B&G Partners. I'm the B part. The other person is Gerald, who's the G part. We are a consultancy. We work mainly with cultural and creative organisations and organisations in the non-profit sector. We offer consultancy, training, coaching, and I guess where we were helping Garden Classroom was what I might call organisational storytelling. So trying to get the kind of information and the evidence together to kind of really talk about what the organisation does in an effective and compelling way.
Thanks, Ben, and Kay, you're kind of at the centre of all this. So please do introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Garden Classroom, what you do, where you are, and then we'll move on to sort of talking through the kind of process of the Bridge programme.
Sure. So I'm Kay Richardson. I'm the CEO of the Garden Classroom. We make nature accessible to all. We deliver significant improvements to people's mental and physical health and well-being, and we empower more people to respect and protect the natural environment. The charity began in Islington in 2008, the borough with the least amount of green space per head than anywhere else in England after the City of London. And we support people to benefit from the mental health and well-being connection of nature, which is scientifically proven to have restorative effects to our minds and bodies. And therefore it's a vital tool to support our mental health and well-being, which improves our quality of life.
Thank you. That was very succinct. And so tell us a little bit about how you came to the programme and why did you apply?
So first of all, I'd really like to thank City Bridge Trust profusely on behalf of everyone at the charity. City Bridge Trust was one of the most responsive and helpful COVID response funders. Our charity, the Garden Classroom, went into lockdown just as we were entering the greatest demand for our services since we began 12 years ago. So it was a key year of growth, but instead we lost all of our traded income, which we planned to cover core salary costs in our growth. So City Bridge Trust were the first funder to reach out and offer support when the majority of our funders told us that we had to ring fence our funding until that we were able to deliver our services again. So this meant that we faced a crisis on how to cover our core costs. And we were afraid of losing our incredible team that we've spent years nurturing. And City Bridge Trust kind of led the way with their communications. They were compassionate and understood the urgent need for funding to support people like us to be flexible. So this was a crucial lifeline at a time of crisis, and it helped us to really quickly adapt. So also thanks for the core funding from City Bridge Trust, because that enabled us to stay operational throughout lockdown. And thanks to providing us with that resource, which in turn enabled us to be resilient. By remaining operational and not closing down, we were able to communicate with our networks and understand directly from them the changing needs of our community and the full impact of COVID. Consequently, we developed a new program called Recovery and Wellness Work to adapt and meet the changing needs of our community. And we were able to pilot this work with children of key workers last summer, which helped us to develop new services and helped us meet peak demand for our services. When City Bridge Trust went on to offer us bridge support, a small charity like ours, we're at a point of growth. Losing all of our traded income put us in a really precarious position, particularly as we were unable to deliver the planned activities which were linked to core salaries. So this had a massive impact on our plans for the charity's growth and indeed survival. We quickly recognised the value of Funder Plus and the power that this would give us, accessing expert support to help us reevaluate and remain agile so that when lockdown eased, we would be ready to meet the predicted surge in activity and demand for our service. So we saw the benefit of the strategic support also offered through Cranfield Trust's Strive programme, which we've also snapped up because we were keen to link our financial forecasting to our strategic growth to help us overcome the setbacks of lockdown, help us improve our work and help us reposition ourselves in the strongest way possible as we expect a surge in demand of our activities. So the Bridge programme is enabling us to evaluate our services. We know that we're small but vital. Our community partners tell us emphatically that we have never been more needed. And by providing a high quality critical service, we know that we're supporting the community to overcome the mental health crisis caused by lockdowns. And because we've got such a dynamic partnership with Islington Council, we've been able to continue to deliver and have priority use of Islington parks. And we've been busy delivering our services to those who've needed it. And their needs have been exacerbated by lockdown. And our national networks tell us that while they've remained closed, they've seen on social media, on Instagram and our website, on Twitter, that we're really active. And, you know, that's a striking difference from many of our different organisations in, nationally. And so it was really when we were delivering our, piloting our recovery and wellness programme last summer and helping children to overcome the issues of trauma, that we were using our questionnaires at pre and post our sessions, and we knew that our service was really supporting them, but definitely we weren't capturing that data. Our questionnaires, the wordings we needed to improve, our vocabulary wasn't suiting those children that English wasn't a first language. And so we were really supported by the Bridge program to access experts. And actually Locality were really dynamic, and they suggested some contacts, but after speaking to them, they didn't have the deep understanding of our work, which is outdoor learning and the importance of nature connection to health and well-being, to help us tease out those stories of our impact. And I'd met Ben Payne from B&G Partners, and previously to that, Ministry of Stories, at a trustee board match at the Four. And I'd attended one of his online workshops during lockdown. And Ben was perfectly placed to help us capture good case studies. We know that we have meaningful impact, but we needed to capture it more succinctly. And while we were working in a consortium on a DEFRA pilot with Mark Harris from Intelligent Health, we know that he understands the national picture and how our data collection links to national data on well-being. And so we thought we'd ask them both to see if they could come together and support us. And they agreed to that, and so we proposed that to Locality, who trusted us and were happy for us to kind of make that connection ourselves, rather than force us and shoehorn in somebody from their connections. We took the time to just really drill down what it was that we wanted, and we found the perfect match. And this collaborative process with Intelligent Health and B&G Partners has worked like a dream. And so now we're piloting the work that we've been doing, and it's been really, really beneficial. But I mean, don't take it from
you. Yeah.
Ben and Mark about.
Yeah, no, let's do that. But I mean, what I would pull out from what you've said is that, and what we've tried to do in with the program, especially as we're kind of doing the test and learn phase of it, is to be flexible really and follow the needs of the grantee, of the client. So, in your case, you mentioned you're kind of relatively small organization, and there are times when we've been able to broker the support that meets the need of the organization, and we've not necessarily that's proportional to their to their size. It's about supporting the resilience and the future proofing organizations and helping them to grow in the future. So we haven't been limited with that. We might, sort of in terms of a reality check, be a bit more limited as we streamline the program going forward, but that's certainly what we've tried to do. And also, actually, this example in that way is not actually all that typical, but because we've got a list of approved providers, and we've often been able to make a good match from that list. But where we haven't, then we're very flexible to kind of opening up and bringing people in and onboarding them onto the program. But Mark and Ben, could you say a little bit about what you did and the way if you like, the two sides of the storytelling and the intelligent health work together?
Yeah, no problem. I'll go first then, Ben, and you can jump in afterwards if you don't mind. So essentially, the end goal for us was to look at what they've done previously, what data they've collected, how they've collected it, and any barriers they had when collecting that data, and also revisit that and see if it was telling the right story that they wanted to tell. So that was the first part. So we had a look, but between us all, we got the whole team together. We really dug into the measures that they used in the past and really probed them on, is this the right measure for the work that you want to see on the ground? We talked to the people actually delivering this work and they told us exactly the outcomes that they would experience in their day-to-day work. And then we compared that with the outcomes that we had from these surveys that were already being used in practice. And we saw that there were just some discrepancies there. The word of mouth picture that we were getting from the deliverers was a lot different to the data that we saw coming out from these surveys. So what we did then, we embarked on a month-long process with lots of brainstorming, lots of meetings, and a very iterative process through discussions, feedback, changes, and developed a new survey. Now that's being rolled out now, and we've got some interim data coming through, every week, and we'll revisit all this data then in August, combine it back together, and then ask those same questions again. Talk to the people doing the delivery, ask them, so what is your experience? What have you seen when you've been delivering these programs? And then look again at that data, and hopefully the stories will be there, and the quantitative data will be there that really brings to life the work that's being completed on the ground. And
Right.
Ben, I'll bring you in there if you don't mind.
And then we'll come to you, Ben, fairly briefly, but just a reminder to our viewers to put your questions in the Q&A box. I'm not sure if I see all the questions, but I'm not seeing any yet. As soon as they start to come in, we're going to start taking them, really, but we'll carry on until we see some questions come in. Ben, you're more on the kind. I always think there's two counters when you're looking at kind of measuring impact. One is, if you like, the quasi scientific systemized way of doing things, and the other is just telling those brilliant stories. And I see your partnership as kind of representing both those sides.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what we do has been based on our experience as the two directors of having run, non-profits ourselves in this country and in the US. And as Kay mentioned, my previous work was as a founder of an organization called Ministry of Stories, which is a writing and mentoring organization. So storytelling was at the sort of heart of it, but it was also something that we grapple with as an organization, how to tell the story of what we do well and effectively and compellingly. And as Kay mentioned, we run a workshop. Now we've run it for about 200 different participants, called Telling Your Story with Impact, and that was how we met. And it was really about us, extending this work that we've done with lots of different organizations through that workshop to doing it as specifically as a kind of consultancy. And to agree with Mark, really, I mean, I just noted down that what we hopefully we've provided is some examples about how other organizations talk about their impact and make it into sort of effective stories, facilitating the work with the team, because they've got a lot of this information and they understanding themselves. They don't often have an opportunity to kind of bring it out and look at it and talk about it. You're giving them ownership over what they're doing, so it isn't a kind of box ticking exercise. It's really important for them to understand how they know what they're doing is actually working. So, what they're doing every day, do you know that it's actually working and having the impact that you want? Giving some user-friendly and simple ways of kind of capturing the stories. And then hopefully what will happen is that leads on to the sort of, the comms, the internal comms and the external communication of that impact, which goes on to kind of build the brand and hopefully helps the organization scale and reach more children and young people. So there's a whole kind of, basically we're hopefully helping through with that kind of process from beginning to end.
Thanks, Ben. And I've got more questions, but we're starting to see a few questions coming in from the participants, so from the audience. So let's open it out. One from Kirsty, which was asking about the getting a sense of the duration of the support provided in terms of the number of days of consultancy time, over what period it can be provided, how flexible, standardized that is. And John, I can see you've typed an answer, so you can add to my fine. You can add to my response. It's actually, again, test and learn. So we have been super flexible. So it's all over the place. I think from your guys, did you do 4 days each or something in that region? From Mark and Ben?
Yeah, 4.5, yes.
Yeah, so that would be kind of average, slightly above average, probably, in terms of what we've provided in certainly the ones that I've seen go through. We have supported some longer pieces of work, but only a small number, and probably the majority have been in the region of 3, maybe 4 days of person time. And the other thing to sort of add is that although we have tended to default to that kind of brokering a grantee with a consultant or a supporter, we also really want to move, and we've tried a little, but we want to move more towards looking at kind of all different ways of supporting, whether that's peer-to-peer support, providing backfill so people can do training or something like that, or a range of stuff. And our providers list, our providers are from kind of the well-known national sort of organizations through to kind of one-person advisors. I hope that gives a sense. John, have you got anything to add? And you need to demute yourself.
Right. No, no, that was a really fine answer. I'm keen we pick up one or two more, Dave.
Okay.
Sarah,
sorry. Yeah, go for it.
Sarah Ridley's asked whether the initial findings from the bridge project have been published anywhere. What I should have said was our role is that we are the learning partner in the programme and have been writing up learning reports for CBT. Those have informed the extension of the pilot, and there will be a full programme evaluation done at the end of this 12 months. There are some initial learning papers which I think we should be able to share, so I'll check back with CBT and come back to you on that.
Okay. Another comment from Sarah, which is aimed at Mark or Ben. I don't know if you can. There's perhaps a little bit detailed, but I don't know if you got an example of the sort of, you were talking about kind of the before and after in terms of the questioning. Have you got anything you could give in terms of an example?
Yeah, great question. So essentially, the first exercise we did with the garden classroom was ask them, what do you think you're achieving, or what do you aim to achieve? And fundamentally, it was they wanted to connect people, adults and children, to nature, and in doing so, improve their connectedness with nature, their appreciation of nature, their care for the environment, and then also get that well-being benefit that we know is established. But so that we knew that they were crystal clear aims and objectives that they were aiming towards. But then we looked at the survey and it was very learning based, and learning really wasn't high up on their agenda. They knew that their work was facilitating their outcomes, but their aims were more broader than that. They were about improving well-being, about getting people outdoors, about embracing people with nature. So essentially, we pulled out those learning questions and weighted the questionnaire that they used much more towards well-being and much more towards connectedness with nature. And that's what's being rolled out now. So we hope to see that really show itself in the reports now towards the end of the year.
And I think it was actually, that was quite a big shift, wasn't it? There was that kind of meeting and that conversation where I guess we kind of made it all right for the organization to kind of go, well, actually, are we essentially an educational organization, or actually are we more about these other impacts? And kind of really looking back at the theory of change model, which was the basis of that, and deciding that the educational aspect of it was important, but it wasn't as important as these other things. So then that has a knock-on effect to everything else that you're doing in terms of gathering data.
Thanks. And Geraldine, do you want to come in at this stage, or you?
Lovely. I was just going to say, so we've got one more question, which I think John is actually typing in answer to Tracy Fletcher. Isn't technology amazing? But still blows my mind. The future is here. You can see when your Uber driver is coming for you. So I am just going to do a bit of a London Funders wrap up, and then just ask for any other thoughts or comments. Kay, can I just say how inspiring your story was? We all know organisations with traded income have been massively affected by the pandemic, and I think there's a lot of questions about, funders have been pushing organisations to exist in such a way, and look what happened. Obviously, nobody could have predicted it, and some really interesting thoughts about, making Funder Plus more flexible for the user and design principles. And how funders can better align their Funder Plus before. Sometimes it feels like you're a kid in a candy shop and you want to have all of these different Funder Plus things and you just don't have the time. So John, I've just seen that you have answered Tracy's questions. If anybody has any more, you've got 2 minutes or forever hold your peace. In the meantime, I'm just going to say a little bit more of a plug for the rest of the Festival of Learning. And thank you guys so much for your contributions. I'm really looking forward to Locality and Rocket Science's other events this week. Our members can attend for free. And Milena has popped the festival in the chat. And just to say big thank you, John and Dave, for bigging up our membership. It is, of course, paid for by membership fees. The mug was a special touch there, John. We really do hope to see you. We hope to see you there. Come along. Do follow us on Twitter. We are trying our best to hashtag at the same time while talking. And if you want to follow up with London funders about anything, please do. We are a small and friendly team. 2 of us are called Geraldine, and now we know that there's a Gerald at B&G Partners where we're taking over the world. Are there any further thoughts or comments from any of the 5 of you before we wrap up this session nice and early for us to go have some lunch?
I mean, I just wanted to add a little bit to your answer, John, with regard to the question about any learning around providing specific support to smaller organisations from Black, Asian, and other minority ethnic. And I think we actually have had quite a good contingent from BAME organisations, and we have also quite a good contingent of BAME supporters and advisors. But I think, for me, there isn't a general conclusion to be made, because all organizations are different, and there's other dimensions as well in terms of size and what their needs are. So we certainly my approach has been to sort of deal with organizations as individual organizations, but as John has also added, this is equally a priority for us to strengthen as we go forward.
Any other thoughts?
I was just going to remind everyone that it's Mental Health Awareness Week, and the theme this week is Nature Connection. And, as an organisation that specialises in it, I just want to encourage everyone to go out today, get some fresh air, look up at the sky, look up at the blossom and the trees, and then.
What's your address, Kay? We're all coming round to the farm.
I'm actually in the Park Rangers hut on Newington Green. That's our office headquarters. So do pop by to say hello, and I'll show you, our HQ. But yes.
Lovely.
And I just thank you 3, especially for volunteering to come and give your be grilled by my David Dimbley impression. Not very good one.
John, did you have something else? I saw you're muted.
Sorry, just to echo Dave's thanks to everyone, particularly the panelists, but also everyone who's signed up for this session. Clearly, we only scratched the surface. So if you do need to follow up, you know where we are. I've just put my own email address in, Dave at Locality. But we are, as I said, rethinking the next phase of this, and we would welcome collaboration and contributions from others to help us do that, so it's even better going forward.
Lovely stuff. Thank you. I'm going to get outside after Kay's recommendation. Have a fabulous rest of the day. Please join us at the rest of the festival. Goodbye, everybody.